Greetings, fellow makers. Welcome to another episode of Prop Shop. I'm Brittany Duran from Punished Props, and I've finally finished my Assaultron costume. This costume ended up taking longer than I thought it would. My goal was to get this guy done for San Diego Comic-Con, and it sort of happened. It was wearable, so I count that as a win. I didn't have time to finish the Assaultron head in a way that was comfortable to wear and looked right. And also I didn't get to paint the bodysuit, but I wore the costume a little bit at San Diego Comic-Con. That convention is so cool. It was awesome to go. I even got to do a photo shoot with some Fallout cosplayers, which was awesome. Also running around in the costume, I realized some of the armor pieces needed to be adjusted. All of the assembly was done the night before the convention, which I wouldn't recommend. Make sure to get that stuff done ahead of time. I'll be wearing this costume for Dragon Con next week, and in this video I'll show you how I painted all the armor pieces and also painted the bodysuit. For sealing the armor, I used a mixture of half poly latex 60 and half distilled water. The latex is super thick and smells pretty terrible. To remove any chunks, I dumped the latex into our shop blender and added the distilled water to make a latex smoothie. Straining the smoothie through a mesh filter removes any remaining chunks. The water in latex starts to evaporate pretty quickly, so I capped off my latex supplies and cleaned out the blender with water. In a separate jar, I mixed up my acrylic pigment. This way I can add some pigment to each application of latex and all the color will match. Poly latex 60 is white, but when it dries, it's transparent, so the original pigment color is what will be the base color of the armor. The first layer of latex was brushed on, making sure to get a heavy application on all the crevices and edges. For all the other layers of latex, I used our Critter spray siphon gun hooked up to an air compressor. The trick is to get a nice thick layer, but not so heavy that the latex starts to drip. I think I applied 5 layers. I would have liked to spray on even more, around 8 layers, but I ran out of time. For Bill's Mechanist armor, he used a mixture of rubber cement, naphtha, and oil paint. You can check out his painting tutorial linked below. I wanted to try out this method on my armor too. When I was putting latex on my armor, I also put latex on a scrap piece of foam, which I used as a painting test piece. We already have a collection of water mixable oil paints, so I used those. I stayed away from normal oil paints since they seem to remove the layers of water mixable oil paints on my test piece. I bet I could have put a layer of varnish on in between the different kinds of paints, but I didn't want to take the time to do that. So for the silver highlights, I just used acrylic paint. The mix of oil paint, rubber cement, and naphtha was dabbed onto the armor with a towel. Naphtha is a pretty nasty chemical, so I made sure to work next to a fan that vented outside, and I wore a respirator. I changed up the color and started using my airbrush for the next few layers of paint, switching between holding the airbrush up close and far away for different textures. The Siphon filter airbrush was great for this because I could switch between pre-mixed containers of paint. I made a stencil in Inkscape that got cut out on the vinyl cutter. This is low-tack vinyl, but it still stuck too well to the paint. The areas that had some paint removed got touched up with an airbrush. I added some yellow to the rusty areas to brighten them up a bit. It was dark outside by the time I sprayed on 2 layers of protective varnish. So pretend this footage of Bill's axe is actually my Assaultron armor. Totally can't tell the difference. That's an Assaultron, not a giant axe. For the weathering, I brushed on water mixable oil paints into all of the low spots and corners. Silver acrylic paint got lightly dry brushed onto the edges. I only applied a thick layer of latex to the outside of the armor, so I had to clean up the inside edges, otherwise the latex may peel away over time. A soldering iron cut a clean line, allowing the thinner inside part of the latex to peel away. I noticed the latex wouldn't peel off areas of the armor that had barge on them. I'm thinking I should have brushed or sprayed on contact cement onto my armor before I put on the latex. I'll make sure to test that out next time I use this process. The seam got covered by strips of vinyl fabric that were glued on with barge. With the armor painted, it was time for the bodysuit. I got some light gray stretchy fabric that would be the lightest color of the bodysuit. I sewed the pants based on a legging sewing pattern. For the dancer swimsuit style top thing, I sacrificed an old shirt as a template and guessed on a pattern. So it doesn't fit that great, but it works for the costume. The armor is attached with sew-in snaps and Velcro, which I'll go over in the next video. I tried on the bodysuit with the armor attached and had Bill use the airbrush to lightly outline the edges of the armor as guidelines. Since I only need to paint the bodysuit parts, that will be visible. Createx airbrush paints mixed with fabric medium are used for the bodysuit. A scrap piece of the bodysuit fabric tested out these paints and let me practice. I airbrushed the paint on and then created sharp lines with a fabric marker. I threw the test piece in the wash to see if the paint and marker stayed, and it still looked great. For the head covering, I bought a gray balaclava. I switched between drawing on details with a fabric marker and airbrushing on gradients of paint for depth. I made sure the fabric was always stretched a little bit, either by using pieces of body forms I have, or cardboard, or shoving towels in there, or whatever works. A lot of the bodysuit just got a gradient of darker color since it was on the edges of the armor pieces. I didn't get too detailed, I just wanted to break up the flat color of the undersuit. After the paint dried, I tossed the undersuit in a dryer since the Createx paints say to heat cure the paint. The fabric medium is probably enough to make the paint permanent, but I just wanted to play it safe. I tried on the whole costume together, and I love the way the painted undersuit adds to the armor. I also love the way the different layers of paint look on the armor pieces. The last part of this build I'll show you is how I put the Assaultron head together, plus how I added all the straps, Velcro, and sewing snaps to the undersuit. But that's all in the next video. Thank you for following along with this video. I now feel more confident using latex to seal my foam. Also, the rubber cement paint worked really well. I'll probably try that more in the future. And it was great to get more airbrushing practice. I still need to level up my sewing, but look forward to that in a future project. If you're just jumping into this build, make sure to check out all of my previous Assaultron videos linked below. Also, thank you for your amazing support on Patreon. We have a ton of more projects and ideas for videos that we are putting together. Head on over to punishprops.com to see all of our tutorials, all of our instructional books, and lists of all the materials and tools that we like to use. Thanks for watching, and now I'm off to suit up, do a photo shoot, and scare the neighbors.